Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Monday afternoon, and we have a lot of Olympic basketball to talk about because the group stages have finally ended. They have concluded over the weekend, and that's going to be what the first segment is going to be about. I'm just going to talk about all of the games that happened over the weekend and all the games that, happened as well on Friday when I was unable to, cover those games because there was a game on Friday. It was France and Germany. They played against each other, and they played after my show concluded, so I was unable to cover it on that day. So I might as well do it here and now, and as well as the United States' matchup against Puerto Rico and Serbia against South Sudan, which determined a majority of the quarterfinal standings and the bracket, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, I'm going to focus more on the actual quarterfinals themselves, who's matching up against who, and why they're matching up against there, and things like that, as well as who I might think, if I have enough time, I might talk about, who I might think who I think might actually make it through. And then in the third segment, I noticed a lot of people are confused as to why Greece was able to qualify in this quarterfinal tournament, but not Spain. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that and why they were able to qualify. It's a pretty dumb reason, but who am I to judge? I don't make the tournament, but yeah, I'm just going to give my opinions on that. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to talk about Kevin Durant not being in the starting lineup and no plans on Kevin Durant being in the starting lineup. I'm going to explain a little bit about that. We also have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment. I like to reveal it at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you're interested in what that's going to be. Before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and go into this first segment, which is going to be about the Olympic Games that went down the other day. Well, over the weekend. I should be a little more specific. I apologize for that. So I actually, I have no idea what game I should cover first. Like, normally I'd go in chronological order, but since the United States played over the weekend, I just feel inclined to talk about the United States game first. So, even though it was arguably, debatably, the most boring game of the entire tournament seeding and the brackets. I mean, the United States, they ended up winning 104-83. This game was never close. Actually, wait, I lied. The game was close in the beginning, and then afterwards, the United States put on the afterburners, and they just never turned them off. And it was really, again, like it was never close. But when the United States is playing, you don't usually expect these kinds of games to be close. But I digress. So, next on the games that was played, these games were played on Saturday, by the way. This was, Serbia against South Sudan. This determined a lot of the qualifications and the seedings on the quarterfinals, right? So, unfortunately, this is South Sudan's final game, and they aren't going to participate in the quarterfinals, so that's unfortunate for them. But they played very good basketball. They were fantastic. And they really put the world on notice in the basketball world. Also, in other news, the United States lost in the 3x3 tournament, like in the 3x3 competition. So, yeah, we might need to send, we might need to send Kyrie Irving over there to just, absolutely cook the entire 3-on-3 standings, but he can't do that, unfortunately. But if you guys want to know why Kyrie and why NBA players can't participate in those competitions, let me know and I'll do a segment on that. But I digress. So again, the Serbian team, they ended up beating South Sudan. This game was very, very, very important not just for both parties to make sure that they stay alive, but also for other teams as well that relied on either a South Sudan victory or a Serbia victory in order to, place themselves in the seeding. If you guys remember from my previous segment where I explained how the qualifications worked, then you would know that South Sudan had to either win by a certain amount of points in order for this, that, and the other to happen, and Serbia also had to win by a certain amount of points in order for this, that, and something else to happen. Like, it's a lot of things, but I'm not going to talk about that again because it's going to confuse everyone, and it really doesn't matter now because all of the teams have already qualified and they've already placed themselves in the quarterfinals, which are set to happen tomorrow. So I'm also going to, talk about that a little bit later. But the other game that ended up happening, arguably the most useless game, like I said the United States and Puerto Rico was pretty useless, but this one, both of these teams qualified. So there was really no need to really play this game, right? Because both of them already qualified. They were both flawless until they played each other. But Germany ended up getting the last laugh in their group standings. They ended up winning 85-71. And I'm very surprised that they ended up beating France. I expected France to end up winning, especially with their fruity home court advantage. Like, it is just, they get it every single match. They get a home court advantage every single time. There was really no excuse for France losing this game. But Germany, they played very, very well. There are some key players that ended up standing out. I'm going to talk about them, obviously, a little bit later. Actually, might as well talk about them now. For the United States game, the best player was clearly LeBron James, the GOAT. Seriously. No, I'm just kidding. He wasn't the best player for the United States this time, but I'm not saying that doesn't mean that he wasn't playing phenomenally well. He was very, very good for the United States. He played great. He played fantastically. 10 points and 8 assists along with 6 rebounds. That is very, very all around. That's one of the more, all around performances that you're going to see from somebody in the Olympics. And aside from him, Anthony Edwards, he was the best player in the entire on the entire United States team. Ended the game with 26 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, was shooting 11 for 15 from the field and 3 of 6 from 3. He was just, he was on a different playing field, on a different level in this game. He was, absolutely fantastic. Can't really get expect anything more from him. You shouldn't expect anything less from him. And it really, while he is coming off the bench, he has made, the argument for being the best player on Team USA interesting, right? There was debate, in the beginning when he was saying that he was the number one option, I thought it was blasphemous. After this game and these matchups, I'm thinking otherwise. I think there's a genuine argument for him being, the number one option for Team USA. But after LeBron, closed out 2 games that were critical for the United States and their reputation, I don't really think there's any argument that you can make for Anthony Edwards just after those performances. But if we're going to exclude those performances, then yes, Anthony Edwards would by far be the best player on this team and the number one option. It's just, there's no doubt in my mind because, let's face it, Steph Curry in this Olympics has been incredibly underwhelming. Joel Embiid in these Olympics has also been incredibly underwhelming. Tyrese Halliburton, another player who's been incredibly underwhelming. And who else? Devin Booker, you could argue that he's been underwhelming, but then again, nobody really talks about Devin Booker unless he's losing and dropping 60 points. Which is, kind of, it sounds mean to say, but that's literally the very few times around the NBA media where Devin Booker gets talked about. And a lot of these players, they've been very underwhelming, especially Joel Embiid. I cannot exaggerate enough just how underwhelming Joel Embiid has been throughout the entirety of this Olympics. But I'm not going to spend the entire time talking about Joel Embiid because there are so many other better players in these Olympics to talk about, like Franz Wagner. Now, I remember, if you guys remember from a previous segment that I did, I didn't understand why Franz Wagner was getting the contract that he was getting. I mean, he's going to make a ridiculous amount of money with the Orlando Magic this coming season, but now that these Olympics are sort of, they're concluding, and, he's been playing phenomenally in these Olympic Games, and I can see why they decided to take a chance on him. I mean, I didn't understand it before, but now I do. He ended the game with 26 points. He was 6 for 10 from the 2-point line and 2 for 5 from the 3-point line. Ended the game with 26, 5, and 2. And he wasn't the only player for Germany that ended up, dropping 26 points. Dennis Schroeder was right there beside him, 26 points. And surprisingly for Dennis Schroeder, he ended up, I did it again. I mixed up the rebounds and the assists. He ended up getting 9 assists and, 4 rebounds. That's my bad. I apologize for that. And I don't know why I keep doing that. That does not make... I always keep messing up. But France, again, as I mentioned before, I was expecting a little bit more coming in from the French team, especially since they had the home field advantage. But it's sort of like, it seems like it's only been Victor that's been playing very well for this team. And I don't understand why, because they have so many talented NBA players on this roster. It doesn't make any sense how it's just, Victor. And maybe this team isn't as strong as we thought that they would be. I mean, it took a miracle it took a miracle and 1 3-pointer for the French team to beat Japan, who was arguably the worst team in the entire standings. In the entire Olympics. The worst basketball team in the entire Olympics, arguably. So, I mean, 14-12 is fantastic for Victor, especially in these Olympics, along with 2 steals. But again, it's like these games and this matchup, I expected France to win, especially with the home court advantage that they have and they inherit throughout the entirety of this postseason. And then finally, the Serbian game between Serbia and South Sudan. The players that played phenomenally for Serbia was Bogdan Bogdanovic. With this performance, he now is the number 1 leading scorer for the Serbian national team. He ended the game with 30 points, 4 rebounds, and 8 assists. Just a fantastic performance coming in from Bogdanovic. Again, I said Boban. I apologize for that. I meant Bogdan. I always mess up the Serbian names. I apologize, but because to be fair, there is a Nikola Jovic on the team, and there's also a Nikola Jokic on the team. Obviously, I know who Jokic is, and I know who Jovic is, but the casual player and the casual person watching is going to have a difficult time figuring out who is who. But that's just me. And again, speaking of Nikola Jokic, he ended the game with 22 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists. Normally, he would get a triple-double in this kind of matchup, but again, he's one of the very few NBA players on his team. So it's not like he can get that many assists. He's more of a scorer in these Olympics than anything else. But that is besides the point. So these are all the great performances that ended up happening over the weekend and all the performances that I really needed to be talking about. So that's going to be it for the first segment. And now I'm going to go ahead and go into the second segment where I talk about the tournament standings, the group standings and where they're at right now. And I am going to show you this with a graphic that I said I was going to give you a graphic, and I did. So I will be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I
wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I'm going to be talking about, or I'm going to be showing you guys the standings in the quarterfinals for the Olympics. I completely lost my train of thought there for a second. I apologize for that. And for those of you guys on the audio side, you guys aren't going to be able to see it, but I will, I'm going to explain and I'm going to give out all of the numbers. But for those of you guys on the video side, you're going to have a better view of exactly what the standings look like. And I'll explain, as well, I'll go into, the quarterfinals and the matchups that are going to happen in the quarterfinals after I show you guys the graphic. So before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let me just go ahead and pull up this graphic real quick so that way you guys can see who is in and who is out. So I will go ahead and hold on just 1 second. Let me just get it ready. There we go. See, I told you guys I'd have a graphic ready for you. Now, doesn't it look fantastic? I think it looks great. Shout out to Taishira for making this for me. She does a great job. She makes a lot of the graphics for all of the shows that we do on the YouTube channel. So it's like if you see the sports podcast that we have, they use graphics that she makes as well. Same with the football. It's mainly football that uses a lot of those graphics. That's going to use some of the graphics in the future. So just thank you for that. Shout out to her. So this is how the standings are looking like. Obviously, if you're in green, you qualify. If you're not in green, in which case you'd be in red, you're disqualified. So for those of you guys that are on the audio side, Canada finished with a record of 3-0 and a point differential of plus 20, so they qualify. Australia, they ended up having a 1-2 record, and Greece ended up having a 1-2 record as well. But due to the point differential between Australia and Greece, Australia was able to rank second in the Group A standings and had they had a point differential of -4, and they've qualified. Same with Greece. They ended up qualifying 1-2 with they had a record of 1-2 and a plus minus or a point differential of -8. Spain had the exact same record as Greece and the exact same point differential as Greece, leaving a lot of people wondering why Spain was able to qualify. Why Spain was unable to qualify and Greece was able to qualify, especially when you consider the fact that Spain was able to beat Greece in their head-to-head matchups. I'm going to get to that in the next segment. I'm not going to dwindle on this now, but essentially there is a tiebreaker in place when the point differential tiebreaker isn't working, right? There is a way that they differentiate it, and I'm just going to go ahead and explain that in the next segment, because if I were to explain it here, it would take up way too much time. So next we go into the Group B standings, and this is one of the more competitive standings, I guess you could say. Germany, they ended up beating France the other day. Therefore, they end up finishing with a 3-0 record in their standings. They ended up finishing with a point differential of plus 26, 3-0, so they are the number 1 seed for the Group B standings. And France, since they lost to Germany, they're now 2-1, and they have a point differential of +2. Brazil got extremely, extremely lucky that they were able to qualify, but it was mainly because of their point differential, because, they were, once you look at the rest of the other teams, you'll understand why the point differential matters so much when you look at this. And they also ended up with the same record as Australia, Greece, and Spain, 1-2. It's just their point differential was better than a majority of them. And now, Japan, arguably one of the worst teams in the entire basketball Olympic standings and the entire basketball in the Olympics period. They didn't win a single game. They were this close to winning a game against France, but they ultimately lost in overtime. You could argue that it was a little bit of a fluky win because the guy made a crazy and one 3-pointer. And, because of that and one 3-pointer, they were able to advance. But, aside from that, I wouldn't call this fluky. That was just a little bit unlucky, and it happens. It genuinely happens. But the only reason why they aren't the worst team in the entire Olympics is because of Puerto Rico right here in the Group C standings. Look at that point differential. That is abysmal. But again, when you play in a standing with the United States, your point differential isn't really going to be all that much. But then again, every single team was able to beat Puerto Rico. The only team that was unable to win was Puerto Rico in these standings. So yeah, it's not really looking good for Puerto Rico. But aside from that and the point differential, for those of you guys on the audio side, Puerto Rico, they finished 0-3 with a point differential of -73. -73, which is insane. That is a huge gap between 1 and 2. That is a crazy gap. But I digress. So, South Sudan, their Olympic run is over, unfortunate for them. They ended up finishing 1-2 with a point differential of -17 because of their recent matchup with Serbia. As I mentioned before in the previous segment, Serbia, they ended up winning 96-85. So that affected South Sudan's point differential dramatically, therefore removing them from contention completely. But then again, South Sudan needed to win if they had any hopes of even, qualifying for the tournament. But Serbia, because of the win against South Sudan and also because of the win against Puerto Rico, they ended up finishing with a 2-1 record and a point differential of 26. It wasn't looking good for Serbia in the beginning because of their first opponent was the United States, and the United States basically mopped the floor with the Serbian team. But they were able to pick it up, and therefore they managed to make it into the standings. So, yay, good for them. And the United States obviously ended up flawless and ended with the best point differential amongst everybody in the entire standings. At all. And, I just want to point this out. I mean, Serbia, while they are 2-1, as you could see right there, they have the best point differential amongst every single team on these lists. They have a better point differential than Canada. They have they have the same point differential as Germany, a better point differential than France, and the better record than Australia, Greece, but also a better point differential than all of those teams. And a big reason is because of their matchup against Puerto Rico, which goes to show why Puerto Rico wasn't the best team. Is arguably the worst team in the entire group standings. But enough of bullying Puerto Rico. Let's go right ahead and, talk about the teams that are going into the quarterfinals, as well as, who they play against in the quarterfinals. So, the matchups, they have nothing to do with standings. I believe they have everything to do with the seeds and, where you get placed. I believe. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's random the teams that you're able to draw and you're able to play against in the quarterfinal, because the quarterfinals looking something like this. Also, it should be noted that the quarterfinals for the Olympics, they're going to start on Tuesday, August 6th, and they start as early as 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, and they end at around 3:30 Eastern Time. So just putting that out there, there's going to be only 4 games being played in the quarterfinal, because, quarter, 4 games. So yeah, it doesn't sound really smart when I say it. But aside from that, the matchup's going to look like this. So Germany is going to end up playing Greece in the very first game at 5 o'clock. So Greece 1-2 with a -8, and Germany 3-0 with a +26. So clearly Germany has the better advantage in this matchup. But Greece, they were able to beat Australia, who actually has more NBA talent than the German team. So there is a possibility that Germany can get upset. Like, there is a very huge possibility. Also, I don't think there's anybody on the German roster that is able to contain Giannis Antetokounmpo, but at the same time, I don't think there's anybody on the Greece roster that's able to contain Franz Wagner or Dennis Schroeder. But again, just food for thought. Next in the matchups at 8:30 is going to be Serbia, so 2-1 with a +26, against Australia, who is 1-2 with a point differential of -4. So I think between the two teams, Australia, just talking on NBA talent, they have the advantage. But given how Australia lost to the Greek national team, like, they lost to Giannis, and Giannis wasn't even playing that well, I'm very scared to see what's going to happen when they match up against Serbia and Jokic, especially with Bogdanovic on the team to help with the scoring. I mean, I think it's going to be very competitive, but I do think Serbia is going to have the better chance in advancing. Next is probably going to be the matchup of the entire day, and this matchup is going to happen right when my show is starting. So if you guys want to listen to my opinions and my takes on the game, I would be more than happy to give them, and I'll be more than happy to talk about them. So this is probably going to be the matchup of the quarterfinals. It is Canada 3-0 with the most NBA talent aside from the United States, and France. So 2-1 and +2 point differential. But it's going to be, Dylan Brooks, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jamal Murray, and they're going up against Victor Wembanyama. And, this is probably going to be the best matchup of the entire quarterfinals, aside from, maybe Serbia and Australia. I feel like that game could also be very competitive. But I think this matchup between France and Canada is going to be one for the ages, without a doubt. It's going to be great. And then finally, the United States, they play against Brazil in the final matchup on Tuesday at 3:30. Now, Brazil, they're 1-2 with a -7 point differential, and the United States is obviously flawless with a +64 point differential. I don't think this is going to be close at all. I think the United States is just going to mop the floor with this Brazilian team. I don't think there's anyone on Brazil that can contain LeBron. I don't think there's anyone on Brazil that can contain Kevin Durant. I don't think there's anyone on Brazil that can contain Anthony Edwards. And, there is going to be someone on Brazil that can contain Joel Embiid, though. But aside from that, again, the United States, they're going to just mop the floor with this team. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near as competitive as they want to be. But really, it's just I don't think the game is going to be close. That's just me, though. Again, this is why we play the game. Anything can happen, and anyone can win in these matchups. But again, Brazil is just, I don't think they got it. I really don't think they got it in them. The only team that Brazil was even able to beat in the standings was arguably the second worst team in the entire Olympic standings. So it's not really looking good for Brazil going into this. But that is all that I have for you guys on the standings and just my opinions on what's going to happen, this, that, and the other. So now I will go ahead and go into the third segment, which is going to just, explain a little bit as to why the Greek team qualified for the quarterfinals, or Greece, I should say, qualified for the quarterfinals, but Spain did not. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain why in this third segment, because a lot of people were confused on that. So be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I am going to explain why the Spanish team was unable to qualify for the Olympics. Meanwhile, the Greek team was able to qualify for the Olympics. Now, a lot of people, when this happened, they took to Twitter and they immediately, started slandering the Greece team. They immediately started questioning why it was structured like this. What was the tiebreaker? How did it work? Because it didn't really make sense. Like, a lot of people were saying, oh, it was because, the Olympics first started in Greece, so Greece makes it in by default just because. Or because, Greece is better and they have Giannis and things like that. But that is far from the truth, and that is not how the tournament is handled. But I'm not going to lie, those excuses are a little bit better than the actual reason why the tournament, the rules for the tournament are taking place, and why the point differential is like that, and why the standings were like that. Now, I'm going to try my best to explain, but it is very, very confusing, and I don't agree with this at all. I think it makes zero sense, but I'll explain why, and I'll just do my best to explain. So, first things first, and let's go right ahead and look at the standings, okay? So, Greece and Spain, exact same record and the exact same point differential. What would be the tiebreaker for this? Well, I did some reading and I did some research, and I found out that this isn't a tiebreaker between Greece and Spain. This is a tiebreaker between Australia, Greece, and Spain. So when you're looking at the point differential, like the point differential that you see on your screen right now, you only look at this point differential when you are comparing the teams to other teams in different groups. For example, you look at this point differential when you're comparing Greece to South Sudan. This is why Greece was able to qualify and not South Sudan, and this is why Greece was the second highest ranking third place team in the clinching spot for the quarterfinals. Because you look at Brazil, and they have a better point differential than Greece, who is also in the third place rankings. But I know what you're thinking. Why is it not just based on point differential overall? Like, how does this exclude Spain? Well, the reason why it excludes Spain is because the tiebreaker is between Australia, Greece, and Spain, meaning that this completely excludes the Canada matchups entirely. It is head-to-head between Australia, Greece, and Spain, meaning that Australia had the better point differential amongst, between Greece and Spain, and Greece had the second best point differential amongst all three of those teams. Like, when they matched up head-to-head against each other, they ended up going 1-1, right? So the point differential between these teams when they went head-to-head is completely different than the overall point differential because it excludes their matchup against Canada, where Canada ended up sweeping the entire Group A standings. So, again, it's very, very confusing, and it doesn't make any sense in my opinion. But if I looked at this article as well. Canada, they moved on by virtue of sweeping the group. From there, though, we head to the tiebreaker, and Australia edges out fellow 1 and 2 squads, Greece and Spain, for second place, thanks to a superior point differential in teams' head-to-head matchups. Meaning that, aside from the fact they have a better point differential, period, like in the entire group, they also had a better point differential when they went head-to-head against each other. So against the three teams, Australia, Greece, and Spain, not counting Canada. Now, the reason why Greece wasn't eliminated as opposed to Spain being eliminated was because Greece's head-to-head point differential placed it third in the group amongst those 1, 2, and 3. Like, again, it's very, very, very confusing. And I don't understand why they decided to use that format as opposed to just a basic head-to-head matchup. Because when you really think about it, right? Yes, they have the exact same record, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, but their point differential here immediately makes them different by default. So why is Australia being included in this tiebreaker when they've already won in the point differential tiebreaker? It doesn't make any sense. It's so confusing, and I cannot stand how it's formatted because it just confuses everyone, and it makes absolutely zero sense. Now, what I think they should have done, right, was actually take the head-to-head matchups between Greece and Spain, because those are the two teams, when you look at record and you look at point differential overall, they are tied. Obviously, when you look at Australia just by record, they're also tied with Greece and Spain. But when you look at the point differential between all of those teams, they're different, which is what the tiebreaker should have been based off of. Like, I can understand why Brazil was able to qualify aside from, South Sudan and, immediately qualify because they qualified immediately after the results of their game, aside from Greece and Spain, which didn't qualify from the start, as well as Australia because, reasons. But again, this makes sense because you're looking at the point differential amongst Brazil and the Greece team, right, and the Spanish team. It makes sense that they qualified because point differential is the tiebreaker. But it's the head-to-head matchups, between Australia, Greece, and Spain that determines who makes it through. And I just don't agree with that whatsoever. I think since these two, they had the exact same record, the exact same point differential, that it should have been based off of their head-to-head matchup. If it was based off of their head-to-head matchup, then Spain would have qualified and they would have ended up taking Greece's spot. And they should have, because realistically, Spain ended up beating Greece. There's no reason why Spain shouldn't be in this. But it's because of that one little rule that nobody understands and that one little way that it differentiates the tiebreaker. I don't agree with that at all. I really don't. Because it takes all three of those teams when Australia has nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with that matchup at all because they are well above the point differential amongst not just, these guys, against the people in this group, but as well as the people in this group that have the same record. Not so much the people in this group. It makes sense, but again, the reason why Brazil was able to qualify immediately was because we already knew that they were going to be, in the middle of the qualifications for Australia, Greece, and Spain, as well as South Sudan. So it was guaranteed that they were going to qualify because it's you have to pick the two best 3 seeded teams in order to qualify. Like, again, super, super confusing and super, super unnecessary. Like, I've confused myself more times than I can actually think when looking at these standings and looking at what determines these standings. It just really... it's taxing on the brain, and it doesn't need to be taxing on the brain. It can just be so simple. It doesn't have to be this complicated. Like, I'm heavily against the formatting of this standings, and I am heavily against how they determine the standings. Extremely against it. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I digress. So I hope that really, explains a little bit as to why it's handled this way and why it's not handled that way, and why this team, why this team qualified, why this team didn't qualify, because honestly, I don't agree with it. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree with it, if you guys understand it, because I confuse myself a lot when I'm trying to, determine these tiebreakers, because it's just unneeded. Like, it's unnecessary math. Like, why? I that's my opinion. But, aside from that, we are out of time for this segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the 4th segment, where I talk about Kevin Durant and his status on the United States team. Mainly the fact that he's not going to be starting in these quarterfinals. So I will be right back after this short break with my very strong opinions on this. So be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the 4th segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this 4th segment, I'm going to be talking about Kevin Durant and him not starting for the quarterfinals of the Olympics. This is something that Steve Kerr told reporters. Once again, he is showing us just how amazing he is at rotations and how fantastic he is at making starting lineups. I'm sure you guys already know my opinions on this idea and the fact that he is not in the starting lineup, but let's go over the article, let's review, let's get an understanding, let's figure out why Kevin Durant isn't on the starting lineup for the quarterfinals. Now, should be noted, Kevin Durant, he is arguably the best United States Olympic basketball player in the history of United States Olympic basketball. Period. The only player that has an argument for being just as good and just as great as Kevin Durant is for the United States is Carmelo Anthony. Now, I'm very, very nostalgic, and I am a huge fan of Carmelo Anthony. And I want to say that he is the best Olympic athlete, period. But Kevin Durant simply is just, his accolades and his achievements for the United States are just overall better than Carmelo Anthony's. I mean, Kevin Durant has more gold medals than Carmelo Anthony now. He also leads the United States in total points as well as total rebounds all time. So he is definitely the best scorer, like pure-blooded scorer for the Olympic team. And you could even argue that Carmelo Anthony is a better Olympic scorer than Kevin Durant. Like, it's really, really close. Like, I don't know if it's really close. I'm not sure if my bias is just getting in the way. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Who do you think is a better Olympian, Carmelo Anthony or Kevin Durant? But I mean, obviously, my nostalgia is going to say Carmelo, just because like he was a dog on the Olympics. Like, people really, like, they forget about Olympics Melo. One of the things that A lot of people, they like to make fun of Melo. Oh, he doesn't win a championship. Oh, he's never won anything in the NBA. He has definitely won gold in the Olympics. Like, his Olympic career is nothing to scoff at. And that is the reason why he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Because of his Olympic career. Not so much his NBA career, his Olympic career. Because it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. Not just for NBA players. It's for international players and Olympic athletes as well. But, a lot of people like to forget that. So, aside from, I could go on and on about how Melo is the best Olympian, but let's go ahead and look at this article talking about Kevin Durant being benched. Now, he was benched in all 3 of the group phase matchups, which I completely understand. Totally understand why. The matchups against these teams, they aren't that good. No need to risk Kevin Durant getting injured. These games, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really matter as much, right? Because, compared to the quarterfinals, they don't really matter. The group standings, compared to the quarterfinals. Now, I'm not saying that they don't matter. I'm just saying they don't matter as much. Especially when you have a team like the United States, where every single player can be in the starting lineup. Which is a problem that I have. That's the thought process. Yes, every player can be in the starting lineup. I don't agree with that thought process at all. Now, Steve Kerr, according to this article, told reporters that the team has found a good groove with Durant in the second unit. So he'll stick with it against Brazil in the quarterfinals on Tuesday. This, I do not agree with at all. Now, Steve Kerr also said, quote, "I think if Kevin Durant had been here from day one, chances are he would be starting," end quote. Kerr also told reporters, quote, "That was the plan coming in, but given that he missed all of our friendlies and came in late, we had kind of established a lineup that we liked, and when we brought him back, he was only going to play a certain amount of minutes against Serbia, and he played so well, and he fit so well with that group," end quote. Now, I understand, you want to group everyone up, this, that, and the other. But I completely disagree with the fact that Kevin Durant is off the bench. I will not have it. I cannot stand it. These rotations coming in from Steve Kerr are the absolute worst. And I usually don't lose my cool like this unless I'm talking about, LeBron or something like that. But this is the very, very last straw. First, he doesn't want to bench Joel Embiid, despite the fact that Joel is playing absolute, I don't even want to say what he's playing but he is not playing like an MVP at all. And then he wants to, not play Jason Tatum, and then all of a sudden decide to play him, and then not play Joel Embiid, and it's just so confusing, and it doesn't make any sense. He has no idea how to work the roster at all. I could do a better job being a coach at him. Now, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I am confused. Why? He is the all-time United States leading scorer. He is the all-time United States leading rebounder. And you have him off of the bench? Excuse me? Because of what? The fact that he wasn't there in the first friendly games? Guess what? He was there when he was winning 4 gold medals. Seniority? Have you ever heard of that? 0 cents. Makes 0 sense to me. I would have rather seen Kevin Durant in the starting lineup and bench Curry. I would much rather see that. In fact, that should be the lineup that they go in with. Start Kevin Durant, bench Steph Curry. Steph Curry doesn't even play the point guard anyway. It's LeBron that plays point guard. Now, a lot of you guys, you're going to say, oh, but Steph Curry's listed as point guard. No. LeBron brings the ball up the court. LeBron 9 times out of 10 brings the ball up the court. He 9 times out of 10 creates the play for Steph. He is the point guard for the team. And it shows in the box scores. And besides, it's not like Steph Curry's even playing that well either. I don't agree with it at all. These are the games that really matter. These quarterfinals determine whether you make it or you lose it all. And in a winner-go-home league, you need the best players playing constantly. You need Kevin Durant out there constantly. And especially now, because I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the Olympics, but Noah Lyles recently won the gold medal. If the United States basketball team does not win the gold medal, this is going to be embarrassing, not just for the United States, but for every single NBA player that was talking down on Noah Lyles for saying champion of what? That is going to be a huge, slap in the face to every single American, not just American, but NBA athlete, period. This is no. I refuse to believe it, and I'm going to say it in the mic so all of you guys can understand. No. Kevin Durant should not be on the bench. He should not. These lineups do not make any sense to me. And yes, he played well under the second unit, but he's going to play well with any unit because he can score. And aside from, playing with the bench, sure, could totally understand him playing with the bench. But you can easily make a rotation for him that allows him to play when the bench is coming in. You have all of the starters in there. Whichever starting lineup you want to bring out, sure. The players that have to be on the starting lineup have to be LeBron James and Kevin Durant. Those are the only guarantees that I know should be in the starting lineup. And if it was me, if I was the one making this roster, I would have Anthony Davis coming. I would have Anthony Davis starting. I would put Kevin Durant in there. I would put LeBron in there. I would also put, I could make an argument for putting Steph Curry in there, but given how he's been playing, I'd actually much rather have Jason Tatum in the lineup, and then you put LeBron at the 1, and then at the 2, you put Drew Holiday. Now, the reason why I'm putting Drew Holiday in there is because he has Olympic experience, he's also a very good perimeter defender, and he doesn't really need the ball in order to be a competent guard for Team USA. So you have LeBron at the 1, you have Drew Holiday at the 2, then you have Jason Tatum at the 3, and then you have Kevin Durant at the 4, and Anthony Davis at the 5. And then, when the rotations have to come in, then you bring out the rest of the starters, aside from Kevin Durant, and then you put in Steph, then you put in Anthony Edwards, then you can arguably put in Devin Booker there if that tickles your fancy, then you put in Kevin Durant, and then you put who else should you put? Then you put Joel Embiid in the lineup. And TJ comes in the chat, he says, love to hear you're coming around on Drew being a starter. Well, given how Steph Curry's been playing, I would actually much rather have Drew in the starting lineup because of the defense, as well as the fact that he doesn't really need the ball in order to be, as dominant as you really need him to be. Again, that's just how I would construct the starting lineup, given how the Olympics have progressed, and how I think, the quarterfinals and how I think it would work for the quarterfinals. That's just me, though. That's how I would structure the starting lineup. Again, I would love to have Steph Curry in the starting lineup, but just off of, how he's playing, I would rather not. But again, I would gladly put Steph Curry in that starting lineup and replace him with Drew. Then, go LeBron at the point guard, Steph at the shooting guard, Jason Tatum at the small forward. I wouldn't mind seeing that. It really doesn't matter who plays the point guard when LeBron is on the court, because LeBron is the point guard. And then again, once you normally want to sub in Drew Holiday, then you can sub in Derek White for the defense, things like that, whenever it's important. But again, Kevin Durant should be in that starting lineup. There is no reason why he shouldn't be in the starting lineup. I refute this. This is an awful line. It's an awful, immediately, just terrible. I can understand when in the games that didn't matter, in those exhibition games, totally understand him not playing. In these qualifying rounds, when I know that the United States is going to win, totally understand why he wouldn't play. But these games, no excuse. There is absolutely zero excuse why Team USA's leading scorer should be on the bench. Zero. Zip. Nada. I want to be the coach. Let me be the coach for the Olympics team, please. I could make a better starting lineup. I think I can make a better starting lineup. But then again, let me know in the comments what you guys think of this of Steve Kerr and his rotations. Do you think his rotations are a W? Do you think his rotations are an L and they need some work? Or are you like in the middle and you think it really doesn't matter because the United States is going to win anyway? That's up to you guys. But aside from that, we are out of time for this segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the fifth and the final segment where I go ahead and I give my predictions for who I think is going to qualify for what, who I think is going to win for what, and this, that, and the other going into this next segment. And the games are happening on Tuesday, so I might as well go ahead and do a prediction on what I think is going to happen right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, I'm just going to give some predictions, who I think is going to win in the quarterfinals and the matchups. And I might go into, the matchups going into, like, the future, like, who's going to win in the semifinals, and then who's going to get the gold, and who's going to get the silver, who's going to get the third place, because there is another matchup for, third place, whoever, I believe it's the losers of the the losers of the semifinals, they play against each other to fight to see, who gets third place. Now, that's, like, honestly, that's like, the worst, I think that's the worst game you could play, in my opinion, like, just fighting for third place, just, that just irks me, playing a game after, the winners, they win, and then you have to play for third place, like, that rubs me such a wrong way. But aside from that, I mean, who am I to judge? I mean, I'm sure that means a lot for so many other countries, but I guess as an American, I am a little bit spoiled, and I'm used to, the United States always winning gold 9 out of 10 times. Now, obviously, I didn't, while I was born, when the United States, they had to settle for bronze, I wasn't, obviously, into the NBA because I was, like, 1 year old. So, aside from that, that was, like, the one time that I've ever seen the United States lose in, like, the Olympics or in FIBA, and that's not counting when the United States, they lost in the FIBA tournament when they didn't even have the best players in the United States. Like, the entire reason why this lineup has even been created in the first place was because of our downfall in the FIBA basketball. And I'm not even going to lie to you, no, I wasn't surprised that this team was able to lose, because it wasn't the best players on the team, and it wasn't the best players in the NBA, and it wasn't the best American players in the NBA, like in that FIBA tournament. So I don't understand why we don't send like teams like this constantly. I remember when it used to be like an honor to represent your country. Now it's just like meh. Like, am I the only one that feels that way? Let me know in the comments if I'm the only one that feels that way. But I feel like the representing your country, at least as an NBA player, is sort of just meh. Not all that. Yeah, whatever. Like, I don't understand. I genuinely don't understand. Like, I give props to Kevin Durant for wanting to play in every single Olympic and FIBA tournament that there is. I give props to him on that completely because he just wants to hoop and he loves representing his country. I cannot hate on him for that. Now, I mean, I can hate on him for his decision with Golden State, but aside from that, I mean, I cannot despise someone who likes their playing these kinds of games, because if I was a basketball player, I would love to just constantly represent my country, and I would love to play in these kinds of games because it's basketball. Like, you just hoop. But aside from that, the first game, as I mentioned before, it's going to be between Germany and Greece. So I think Germany is easily going to beat the Greek team by a considerable amount. Again, given how dominant Giannis is, it's definitely possible that Giannis can will this team into the next round. I just don't see that happening. Now, the only reason why I think that is possible is because they were able to beat Australia, that was loaded with NBA talent. And they had more NBA talented players than the than the German team. So, with all of that in mind, I think that the matchup is going to be, it's going to be pretty interesting, but Germany, they should easily win. Like, it shouldn't even be a contest on whether or not they win. Like, I really think that this is just going to be, they're going to wipe the floor with this team. And if they don't, then that's not going to look good for them. But again, Germany, they are a very talented team. And they do have, while I said that they don't have as much NBA talent as Australia, they do have NBA talent. And that's something that should not be underestimated. So, next on the list is Serbia against Australia. Now, again, Serbia, they don't have as much NBA talent as Australia does, but they do have NBA talent, and they arguably have one of the best centers to ever live in Nikola Jokic. And I said arguably. Like, I didn't say he was the best. I said arguably. And I mean, Jokic, while he hasn't really been like a triple-double machine as he usually is, like in the NBA, he still is a very competent player, and he still is very valuable for the Serbian team. Could totally see him going off. Could also see Bogdan go off as well. And really, I think this is going to be a pretty close game, but I do think I really want to say Australia is going to win, but I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't understand. I think it might just be because like they recently lost to Greece, who only had Giannis. And if they were struggling to guard Giannis, I can only imagine how much they're going to struggle to guard Jokic. But that's just me. And again, Giannis didn't even play that well, and Greece was still able to win, despite the fact that they didn't have NBA talent. Now, maybe they were going into the Greek game, like the Greece team, and they thought, oh, it's just Giannis. We don't got to worry about anything. And they all of a sudden had a great game. I don't know. I feel like the pressure is on for Australia, and I don't know if they have enough players to really meet that moment. So I really want to go with Australia, but I'm going to have to go with Serbia in this one. So next, the United States and Brazil. Easily the United States. Next is the final game on the... I know I just skimmed over, the United States and the Brazil game and, the final game of Tuesday. But I mean, seriously, that's going to be an easy win. That's going to be an easy win for the United States. I don't see the United States losing. If they lose, oh my Lord, the Twitter is going to be rolling. Noah Lyles is going to be rolling. If they don't win by 20, everyone is going to be rolling. Like, the pressure for the United States, it is a lot. There is a lot of pressure, but they're just too good. I think they're too good to fail. This is like, Avengers. Like, I'm not going to finish that because I don't want to get copyright strike, but, they're the Avengers. That's what you call them. But aside from that, Canada and France, arguably going to be the game of the day, and I'm definitely going to tune into that game, and I'm going to watch it live. So if you, in the next segment tomorrow, if you guys see me looking over there, that means I'm looking at my TV, and I'm looking at the matchups. I think this game is going to be the game of the week, could be the game of the day. I think it's going to be great. Now, if France loses, this is going to be a really huge upset, in my opinion, mainly because France has home field advantage. They're going to lose. They could lose with home field advantage, and I expect Shai to go off in this game. I don't know why. I just expect him to go off, and my money's on Canada. Now, I'm also saying this because I hope that the United States doesn't have to worry about facing France in the finals. But aside from that, I do think if it wasn't for France and their recent struggles against Germany, as well as their recent struggles against Japan, the second worst team in the entire standings, I would have picked France. But because they lost in those previous few games, I have my money on Canada. And I think that Canada has aside from the NBA, they have the second most, and they have the most NBA talent, period, on this roster. And one of the things that should be noted is that Jamal Murray has not been playing well at all in this Canadian team. So that might come back to bite them in this matchup. But I really do think that Canada has the best chances. But that's just me. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of these matchups and what game are you excited for the most. But aside from that, we are out of time for this podcast. Therefore, that is the end of this show. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. It really helps the show. It makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all I have for you guys today on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.